The Grand Strategic Institute of the Galactic Coalition floated in the void between three suns, its crystalline spires catching light from multiple stars simultaneously. For 8,000 cycles, the Academy had trained the finest military minds from across 200 species, teaching them the art of warfare through simulation and strategy. The institution prided itself on producing commanders who could outthink any opponent, anticipate every move, and craft victory from impossible odds. Commander Vothric stood before the assembled class of senior strategists, his forearms clasped behind his segmented torso. The reptilian officer had seen actual combat in 7 campaigns and bore the scars to prove it. His vertical pupils swept across the auditorium, studying the diverse collection of beings who represented the Coalition's best and brightest. "Today marks your final examination," Vothric announced, his translator rendering his clicks and hisses into common language. "You will face the contested zone scenario, a simulation that has defeated every class for the past 50 cycles. Multiple factions, limited resources, civilian populations in crossfire. The scenario runs for 6 months of compressed time. You have 48 hours to formulate your strategy and execute it within the simulation." The students shifted in their various seats, appendages, and resting positions. This was the test that determined who would receive command positions and who would remain in advisory roles. Failure meant another year of study. Success meant glory and immediate assignment to fleet operations. Among the assembled strategists sat a human named Jack Torres. He was the first of his species to attend the Academy, arriving 2 years after humanity had made first contact with the Coalition. Compared to his classmates, he appeared unremarkable. No natural armor plating, no enhanced sensory organs, no redundant biological systems. Just a biped with forward-facing eyes and opposable thumbs. The other students had initially dismissed him. His species had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Humans had no significant military victories against peer adversaries in space. Their homeworld had only recently unified under a single planetary government. What could they possibly contribute to an institution that had perfected warfare across millennia? Torres had proven more capable than expected, though his methods confused his instructors. He passed tactical simulations not through superior firepower or clever maneuvers, but through unconventional approaches that didn't quite fit established doctrine. His academic performance remained solid but unspectacular. Most assumed he would graduate somewhere in the middle of his class and receive a minor posting. The scenario loaded into the simulation chamber. Holographic displays materialized, showing a cluster of resource-rich worlds caught between 3 expanding powers. Trade routes intersected through neutral zones. Civilian populations numbered in the billions across dozens of colonies. Ancient treaties created a web of obligations and tripwires that could escalate minor skirmishes into total war. The students divided into teams, each taking control of one faction. Torres found himself assigned to the weakest position, a confederation of mining colonies with limited military assets and an economy dependent on trade with all other parties. His faction possessed defensive capabilities, but lacked the projection power to threaten neighbors. Most strategic analyses gave his side a 3% chance of achieving victory conditions. His teammates included Grix, an insectoid tactician known for precise calculations, and Mara, a crystalline being whose species communicated through light pulses and excelled at logistics. They greeted Torres with polite professionalism that barely concealed their disappointment at the assignment. "We should fortify the primary trade hub," Grix suggested, mandibles clicking as data streamed across their compound eyes. "Defensive posture, make ourselves too costly to attack directly." "Agreed," Mara chimed, her facets refracting light in patterns that indicated concentration. "We lack offensive capability. Survival should be our primary objective." Torres studied the scenario parameters in silence. The other factions had already begun their preparations. The militaristic sovereignty was mobilizing fleets. The theocratic union was leveraging religious influence to sway neutral parties. The corporate syndicate was buying mercenary contracts and establishing economic chokeholds. All three possessed the strength to crush his confederation, but each was also watching the others, maintaining a tense balance. "What if we don't fight at all?" Torres asked. His teammates turned toward him. Grix's antennae twitched in confusion. Mara's light pulses stuttered. "Clarify statement," Grix requested. "The scenario requires military resolution. Victory conditions stipulate territorial control or economic dominance." "Right, but it doesn't specify we have to shoot anyone to achieve those conditions," Torres replied. He pulled up the scenario's underlying economic data, highlighting trade routes and resource dependencies. "Look at the actual situation. None of these factions can afford total war. The sovereignty needs our rare earth minerals for their reactor cores. The Union requires our food shipments to feed their shrine worlds. The Syndicate's entire profit model depends on trade flowing through our space." "Classic deterrence theory," Mara observed. "Make yourself valuable enough that destruction becomes counterproductive." But the scenario assumes conflict escalation. Historical precedent shows economic interdependence fails to prevent war. "Because someone always shoots first," Torres agreed. "So we make it impossible for anyone to fire that first shot without destroying what they actually want." Over the next 6 hours, while other teams built fleets and plotted invasion routes, Torres implemented something the Academy had never seen. He didn't fortify military installations. Instead, he made every single asset in his confederation critical to all other factions simultaneously. Mining operations were restructured with worker populations from all three rival powers. The Union's priests needed access to their shrines on Confederation worlds, so Torres granted it freely and placed those shrines adjacent to critical infrastructure. Syndicate corporations were invited to build facilities that created jobs for locals. Sovereignty military advisors were welcome to establish training programs. He wove the Confederation so deeply into the fabric of the other factions that any attack would hurt the aggressor as much as the target. Union bombardment would kill their own clergy. Sovereignty invasion would destroy facilities maintaining their fleet reactors. Syndicate blockades would bankrupt their own subsidiary companies. "This violates the spirit of the exercise," Grix protested. "We're supposed to demonstrate military prowess." "The scenario says achieve victory conditions," Torres countered. "It doesn't say how." "Give me 3 more hours." While rival factions maneuvered their forces and made preliminary strikes against each other, Torres went further. He opened Confederation space to refugees from the escalating conflicts. When the Sovereignty and Union clashed over a disputed system, he offered the Confederation as neutral ground for negotiations. With all parties maintaining small presences on Confederation worlds as insurance, he positioned his Confederation not as a military power, but as the one place where all factions had interests worth protecting. The mining colonies became the location where secret communications happened, where back-channel diplomacy occurred, where prisoners could be exchanged without loss of face. The simulation accelerated. Months passed in hours. The other factions found themselves in grinding attrition, their militaries bleeding resources while their economies suffered from disrupted trade. The only place where commerce continued normally was through Confederation space. The only place where their various interests remained secure was under Confederation protection. Torres made his final move at the 4-month mark of simulated time. He called a general conference on the Confederation's capital world, inviting all faction leaders to discuss terms. He didn't threaten. He simply presented data showing that continued conflict was destroying more value than any possible territorial gain could recover. Then he offered an alternative. The Confederation would expand its neutral zone. All factions could access resources, maintain presences, and protect their interests, but under a collective security framework administered by the Confederation. No single faction would dominate, but all would benefit. Trade would resume. Reconstruction could begin. The alternative was years more of mutually destructive conflict. The simulation's artificial intelligence, designed to play rational actors, did what rational actors do when presented with a superior alternative. The faction leaders agreed. Borders were redrawn. Treaties were signed. The Confederation emerged not as a military victor, but as the indispensable guarantor of a new peace. The simulation ended. Torres's faction had achieved every victory condition without firing a single shot. The auditorium fell silent as the results displayed. Other teams had created impressive tactical victories and clever operational art, but every military solution had resulted in billions of simulated casualties and devastated economies that would take decades to recover. Torres had ended the war before it truly started and created a framework for lasting stability. Commander Vothric approached the podium slowly, studying the data from multiple angles. His species had evolved as apex predators. Warfare was encoded in TH,